Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Good Reasons series with Pastor Kurt. Today, we're going to try to answer the question, why does the universe point to a mind? It's one of the oldest questions in philosophy, and it's surprisingly simple. Why does anything exist at all? Right? When we look at the universe, we notice something important. Everything in it appears to be contingent on something, right? That means things exist, but they didn't necessarily have to exist. Their existence depends on something outside of himself. A star could fail to form, a planet could fail to exist, and even the universe itself could have failed to exist. That leads to a deeper philosophical question. If contingent things cannot explain their own existence, what explains the universe? This argument suggests that metaphysical reasoning, about causality, points to what we call a necessary cause, which is something outside the universe that is timeless, immaterial, and capable of bringing the universe into existence. So a basic principle in philosophy and science is this: things do not simply appear without explanation. Where did it come from? Where did the universe come from? And if it came from another multiverse, where did that multiverse come from? You have a continuous cycle of explanation that's required, and at some point the buck has to stop somewhere with something that is not contingent on something else. So if something begins to exist, it requires a cause. This idea rests on a distinction between two kinds of existence, and this is where these words come in. First is contingent existence. These are things that depend on something else to exist. They could have failed to exist or not exist at all. Second is necessary existence. A necessary being does not depend on anything outside of itself. If everything that exists were contingent, we would have an endless chain of explanations. Everything would depend on something else, but nothing would ultimately explain why anything exists at all. That leads philosophers to conclude that contingent realities ultimately require a necessary cause. A contingent reality requires a necessary cause. So if causality is true, right, the next question is relatively simple. Did the universe begin to exist? A well-known philosophical argument called the Kalam Cosmological Argument reframes the issue like this. It's very simple. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. One reason philosophers argue that the universe began is the problem of an infinite past. If the past were truly infinite, the present moment could never be reached. That infinite sequence cannot be completed by adding events one after another. It's infinite. It never ends, either in the beginning or the end. But we're here now. The present does exist, and that suggests that the series of past events is finite. It implies that time and therefore the universe had a beginning. If the universe began to exist, it must have a cause. But the universe contains space, time, matter, and energy. So that means the cause of the universe, cannot be spatial, temporal, or material. It must exist outside the universe itself. In other words, the cause of the universe must be timeless, it must be spaceless, immaterial, and by consequence, extremely powerful. There's another important question. What kind of cause could bring about a universe that has a beginning? If the cause were a mechanical set of conditions, the universe would exist whenever those conditions exist. In that case, the universe would be eternal. But the universe appears to have a beginning. That suggests the cause acted freely, not mechanically. At this point, philosophy recognizes two broad possibilities for the cause of the universe. Either the cause is an abstract object or it is a personal agent. Now, abstract objects include things like numbers or mathematical fruits. They exist conceptually, but they have no causal power. They cannot make anything happen. It's not that first domino to tip. That leaves one remaining option: a personal agent with mind and will. A personal agent can exist independently and initiate an action freely. Philosophers like William Lane Craig argue that this is the only type of cause capable of producing a temporal universe without itself being contingent. In other words, the origin of the universe is best explained by a transcendent mind existing beyond space, time, and matter. Now, a competing worldview is philosophical naturalism. And naturalism says that reality consists only of matter, energy, and physical laws. But this view faces major difficulty. Science operates within what we call paradigms, frameworks that assume certain ideas about reality. Okay. Naturalism assumes that only physical causes exist, but that assumption is a philosophical statement. It's not scientific. Within that framework, the universe must either be eternal or arise from impersonal physical processes. Yet both options struggle philosophically. An eternal universe creates the problem of an infinite regression. An impersonal physical process would themselves require an explanation. Where do those physical processes come from? If matter and energy cannot explain their own existence, naturalism cannot ultimately explain the origin of the universe. So philosophical reasoning about causality leads to a profound conclusion. If the universe is contingent and began to exist, it cannot explain itself. Whatever begins to exist requires a cause, and the nature of that cause must be timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and immensely powerful. When the possible explanations are considered, abstract objects cannot cause anything. And that leaves one remaining explanation. Again, a personal agent, a transcendent mind capable of bringing the universe into existence through an act of will. And in that sense, the origin of the universe points beyond itself, not to blind chance, but to a mind.
Thank you for watching Good Reasons with Pastor Kurt. Until next time.